Hello everyone and welcome to your descriptive writing video. This is obviously in relation to your Christmas homework task where you have the snowy forest scene image as your stimulus image. And what I'm going to do in this video is essentially what I've done in all of the other descriptive writing support and guidance videos. I'm going to be looking at how to plan and structure our responses, our descriptions, and then also how to construct paragraphs that follow the AQA descriptive cycle. So, a quick reminder about some golden rules. First thing, of course, is we write in third person. It's much easier to manage, and many of the things that we want to accomplish in our writing, especially I would say the use of a flashback and some shifts in location, that is easier to do in third person rather than the necessary limitations we experience if we write in first person. Obviously, complete sentences, avoiding fragments, unless we are controlling, say, single word sentences where it's very clearly intentional and designed to produce some sort of effect. And then also writing in the past tense. Okay, again, easier to manage if we are consistently in the past tense, and it can become a little bit tiresome to read something written entirely in the present. Okay, reminder from last week too. So the advice from AQA is to be a butterfly and not a grasshopper. So what do we mean by that? Well, a grasshopper, if you think about the analogy, the comparison, a grasshopper hops rapidly from one location to another. And in our descriptive writing, if we do that, we can end up producing rather list-like descriptions that hop from one detail to another, from one place to another, without the opportunity for the reader to be able to actually imagine or picture what it is you're describing. And obviously, that's going to necessarily, therefore, be a failure of description if that's what happens. Whereas if we're a butterfly and we linger and rest on single details, single locations, and so on, it gives us the opportunity for, I suppose, staying with an image where we can really immerse our readers in vivid, controlled, descriptive details. So we don't hop around like a grasshopper, we linger on individual details as if we were a beautiful butterfly. Okay, so generating ideas. Now, this is a slightly higher resolution picture I have in this video than the one that you have. It's obviously bigger as well than the one you have on your handout. So, I mean, they're essentially very, very similar images. And as we know, it's a stimulus image. So if we want to move beyond it, we're perfectly at liberty to do so. So we go through these four steps or stages. And the idea is we move from the literal, what we can literally observe in front of us, what can we see in the image, to associations, ideas, feelings, concepts, and so on, that we link or associate with what we are looking at. We then take those associations and those ideas and we think about how can we carefully sequence this in a way that's going to be interesting and engaging, ideally with some form of flashback, ideally, as we did with the Venice example, a paragraph where there's a sense of struggle or difficulty or challenge. And then in the final paragraph and final section of our descriptions, we effectively return to where we were at the beginning, although, of course, something needs to have changed. So in the example today, without producing spoilers, we're going to be shifting time. So by the time we get round to our final paragraph, the sun will essentially be setting. Okay, so I'm mentioning this because if we aren't feeding our imaginations lots of ideas, it's very, very hard to produce much of worth when it comes to the associate phase of the planning and idea generation sequence. The minute I saw the image, the snowy forest image, I thought of this story. So I'm not going to give you a breakdown of the story, but what I will do is I'm going to share via Google Classroom a PDF of the story, but also a short animated film based upon the story too, which is, you can see a screenshot there at the bottom of the screen. And, watch the video, read the short story. It's a great short story. But I'm sharing this because immediately I was thinking, oh yeah, To Build a Fire by Jack London, great story. I'm not stealing, I'm not copying his story in my description, but I am borrowing the thinking behind the story. Okay, and there are a number of things that Jack London does. So, for example, as you can see there, nature is indifferent, survival is this kind of process requiring endurance. There's nothing sort of heroic in the story. Tension around small details, particularly obviously the cold and the impact on the human body. And then how setting should be the sort of main force in the description. So all of those things are there in the story, and all of those things I can borrow and use to influence my descriptive writing. So, the more we read, the more we engage with even narrative video games, TV series, obviously novels, short stories, graphic novels, films. The more we can engage with those sorts of things, the better, because it just builds our the kind of reserve of ideas that we can draw upon. Okay, so from image to plan, we start, of course, with what we can observe. What can we see? We can see a vast snow-covered landscape. We can see the way it sort of stretches off into the distance. We can see trees that are absolutely locked in frost and snow, heavy with ice. The sun is low in the sky. Clearly, in this environment, it's offering very little warmth. There's cold light filtering through the forest. It's going to be rather weak. There's no shelter. In fact, there's no signs of life or movement in this. It feels, I know it's a photograph, so it's necessarily static, but it feels static as well. Great. That's what we can see. Okay, the kind of colors of the clouds and so on, but that's literally what we can see. And that's fine. But obviously, we want to produce something really interesting. We're not just listing elements in the scene. We want to go beyond the picture, start linking ideas. So what can we see? Fine, we've observed that. Now we're thinking, what can we feel? Or what do we associate with the image? So I'm starting to think about the extreme cold. I'm starting to think about exposure to the elements and the physical vulnerability that results from that. I'm thinking about the silence of such an environment, that sense of isolation, abandonment, obviously, as we mentioned, vulnerability to the elements. The scale of these sorts of landscapes compared to our size as human beings, and obviously that emphasizes how small and transient and fragile we are as a species. And then this is taken really from To Build a Fire and the work of Jack London more generally, the author I previously mentioned, this idea that nature is indifferent. Nature isn't concerned or engaged with us. It's this indifferent, impersonal force that is unchanging. So I'm not depicting nature as an enemy, as if it's going to be, attacking the man or anything like that. It's sort of, informally, we might put it like it couldn't care less. It just sort of exists. It is, and we are within that environment. But nature itself is unchanging and seemingly unconcerned with the individual making his way across this snowy landscape. And then I want this sense of survival is about endurance, okay, kind of getting through the experience rather than anything triumphant or heroic. It's what makes Jack London's writing feel very grounded and kind of gritty and realistic. There's nothing heroic about experiencing these environments. It's about that sort of grim determination to endure and to survive. So the sequence, okay, the structure, of course, allows us, if we think carefully about it and we plan properly, allows us to move across time. So what I want to do is I want to use a flashback for contrast. Cold environment, flashback to a warm environment. And I'll explain what I mean. So my opening, I want my traveller, I'm going to have a traveller crossing this inhospitable and frozen landscape. The reason why is search for food, checking kind of traps and snares that he sets to try to, trap animals to eat. The flashback, though, will be to warmth and safety, the warmth and safety of the cabin before setting out. So I can kind of contrast the cold, inhospitable environment out there with the warmth and seeming safety of the cabin. The return, though, is back to the present and this sense of struggle, the cold tightening around the man, his effort increasing in the freezing cold weather. Obviously, he's collecting food, collecting these animals that he's trapped from the various traps and snares that he's laid out. And then finally, the ending, the journey continuing, going back to the cabin, obviously it being a long way away. Nature is this sort of vast and unchanging and unchanged force, indifferent to his plight, his suffering, his difficulties in this environment. The tone then. So we're not going to have a tone that's, full of laughs and humour and comedy, because it's not lending itself to that. It's going to be cold, detached, restrained, serious, an emphasis on nature's indifference rather than nature as an enemy or nature as an adversary attacking the man or anything like that. And so I want some tension, and I want it rooted in his survival and the uncertainty that we can surround his survival with. That we kind of, is he going to survive? That's going to generate some uncertainty and obviously the engagement with the narrative. So ultimately then, overall, quiet, cold, detached, and a strong sense of, and an unsettling sense of human fragility in this inhospitable landscape. That's the tone and the focus that I want in this piece of descriptive writing. So here's a structure: inhospitable present, flashback, the struggle, survival in the cold, deliberate endurance as he's seeking out food, and then obviously back to nature. And the survival continuing without that sense of certainty. Is he going to survive or not? Okay, writing cycle. Usual cycle: inform, describe, reflect, react, connect. Typical cycle, we follow it each and every paragraph and section. Each aspect of the cycle is not necessarily one sentence, because what I'm going to show you now is a set of sentence scaffolds. Now, the homework gives you space for an introduction, your opening paragraph, that is, and then your concluding or your final paragraph. So you've got your opening paragraph of your description and your closing paragraph of your description. That's what we're asking you to do. Not the whole description. You can do that if you wish. And obviously, I've given you a sequence to follow, but I've given you sentence scaffolds this week to support you. You know what? It's Christmas. This is my gift to you. So just to walk you through some of these sentence scaffolds, okay, so in this world, this is the opening one, in this world, the sun was a timid, muted presence. So I wanted to focus on the sun and this kind of idea that the sun is not really comfortable in this environment. Obviously, there's a degree of personification going on there, that the sun is kind of weak, lacking power. You know, we normally associate the sun with sort of power and intensity and dominance and those sorts of ideas. But here, I want the idea that this is not the sun's kind of dominion or domain. This is not where the sun has power or kind of holds sway over this environment. Focus on the branches. Now it says the inert indifference. I want this kind of unfeeling, unchanging, unreacting kind of nature. Nature is this sort of blunt, unchanging, coldly indifferent force. I think that'll be more effective than nature is sort of attacking the man, which we've read before and maybe a bit boring. Seeds waiting underneath. You know, we had a great bit of IP, bit of training from Miss Frayne recently, all about sort of moving through a scene through the use of these sorts of prepositions. This comes from direct from AQA, so kind of go beneath the white snow, thinking about the seeds waiting, again, sort of personifying the seeds. Their forefathers, trees huddled in mass ranks of dark green, gazed desperately towards, a sun that knew nothing of them or whatever. It's up to you. Okay, a little bit of Lord of the Flies creeping in there. But I like the idea of connecting the seeds and their forefathers, kind of what came before the seeds, of course, is the trees around them. Then we introduce the character dressed in thick furs, clapping. He's trying to warm his hands up, kind of clapping his hands together, warming his hands up, breathing heavily. Would he find his delicately set snares full, or that sense of uncertainty, is it going to be food or not? Nature, inscrutable, unknowable, impossible to really kind of read or know or really truly understand. Focus on the frost fixing itself on his eyelashes, blinking, that idea that it's difficult, it's painful. And then yearning for warmth, yearning for home. Okay, which again, it's a connect sentence, so it leads us on to the next paragraph, which, if we were to be writing it, will be all about the cabin and that flashback to the warmth, kind of comfort of the cabin. We're going to skip, though, to the closing paragraph. This is the final one. So if we open with, you've got sun, okay, it's muted, but the sun is there. In the final paragraph, the sun is dipping below the distant mountains, taking with it the light, any kind of residual warmth. Soon the night would crawl across the land. Crawl, that verb, it's unsettling, rather negative connotations, almost kind of predatory connotations, not not an attractive verb to be using, something kind of stealthy and secretive and uncomfortable. His feet crunched through snow. That I was thinking about the thickness of the snow, the difficulty of moving through it. The ragged pant and whistle of his breathing sounded like. So he's kind of really tiring. So he's kind of panting for breath, and he's sort of wheezing. His breath is kind of whistling in his mouth and in his nose. Again, that sign of kind of fatigue, that he's sort of pushing himself to his absolute physical limit to get back from retrieving the food from the snares. In the fading pale light, his vision became monochromatic. So when the light starts to fade, it's almost like he's seeing the world in black and white, the world being kind of drained of color, shadows emerging, all that sort of thing. When would he be able to feel the warmth of home? The fires of home, the company of others, a hot meal, all so tantalizingly beyond him, out of reach, and so on. He shook his head, I'm thinking about him trying to kind of like wake himself up almost. He's feeling this kind of overwhelming desire to just lie down in the snow and go to sleep, and obviously he'd pass away, walk, keep driving forward, legs moving metronomically. This idea that he's sort of having to just keep on walking, step after step after step, just walk, 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 don't stop. To live, and this is a big sort of philosophical, very Jack London kind of reflection, to live, a man must have warmth, food, and water. In this land of ice and frost, all else was. And I had this idea of, outside of those absolute basic essentials of survival, warmth, food, water, what do we need? We need to be warm, shelter, warmth, food. We need to eat. We need to drink. We need to drink water. In this kind of environment, anything beyond that, it's sort of stripped of value. It must feel kind of meaningless. Things like money and fashion, clothing that isn't practical and warm. Anything that essentially falls out those three basic, absolutely essential, almost kind of like primitive primal needs, must feel like a luxury. Okay. Sort of reminded of the line in Bayonet Charge, dropping like luxuries. That idea that in these moments of survival and endurance, kind of just existing, what do we need? Well, we need these sort of basics. It's just anything else is meaningless. Okay, so those are the slides. Those are the sentence scaffolds. This is your video to help you scaffolds this week to make your life even easier and more straightforward. And hopefully I've given you some interesting ideas that will help you be really successful in this piece of descriptive writing, because we know it's a massive focus, and if we do a really great job with this, we're going to get ourselves a fantastic English language grade. So I hope you have a wonderful, restful Christmas, an enjoyable Christmas, a really happy New Year as well, and I will see you, hopefully refreshed, raring to go for the final push for those final few months of Year 11 when we return in 2026. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next year.